Today, we delve into the mysteries of Antarctica, where ice holds secrets that could change our perception of reality. Find old Antarctic sea charts published before 1950. Look for an anomalous zone where navigational markings become blurred. My grandfather, who worked in the state archives, destroyed documents. Before he died, he gave me a notebook with records of what happened in 1946. Write in the comments if you find anything similar on your maps. I need to know I'm not the only one seeing this. November 12th, we are aboard the Lee Dakal mapping. We were equipped with the best equipment, but none of us believed the official version. Too much security, too much secrecy. The real reason for our journey is something found in captured German archives. Reports, maps, encrypted radiograms. They didn't show them to us. Danov only mentioned that the previous German expedition in '38 found an anomaly. Today we reached our destination. The place didn't resemble any maps. Instead of a clear coastline, there was an ice barrier. A wall hundreds of meters high, disappearing into the gray sky. The ice was different, almost black, with deep blue veins as if eternity was frozen within it. It absorbed light. Peterson said the ice barely reflected acoustic signals. The echo sounder produced meaningless noise. Don Ivan listened to his report, looked at the maps at the black wall, and ordered preparations for landing. He said we were there. November 14, 1946. 2 days were spent on preparations. Attempts to find a bypass led nowhere. The black barrier stretched for many miles. It was monolithic. Demolition experts laid charges. We watched from a safe distance. The explosion was supposed to be deafening, but the sound was muffled, viscous. The black ice simply bent. A melted dark passage, a tunnel formed in the wall. Its edges were smooth, as if cut with a hot knife. We landed on the ice. The first group, Donovan and his men, then engineers and us. The first thing I felt stepping onto the surface was the absence of the usual crunch. The ice was hard, but somehow resilient. Dead. Inside the tunnel, everything changed. Outside, a piercing Antarctic wind blew, temperature around -30. But after 20 steps inside, the air became still and warm, maybe 0 or slightly above. The steam from our breath disappeared. Flashlights cut through the darkness of the walls, and I understood. From the air, Peterson took out his instruments. His Geiger counter was silent. The magnetometer went crazy. He muttered that some fundamental laws were violated here. Langley tried to scrape the wall. His steel tool left no scratch on the black surface. He said the material's density exceeded anything he had encountered. We walked for about an hour. The corridor went straight. The hum became clearer. Finally, we entered a hall. A huge hall, so large that our flashlight beams didn't reach the ceiling or distant walls. They simply disappeared into the darkness. The air here was even warmer, almost like a room. And in the center of this hall stood something. A huge, complex structure of the same black ice. It rose from the floor and disappeared into the darkness above. Consisted of thousands, maybe tens of thousands of interconnected polyhedrons of various sizes. Geometry was irregular, impossible. Looking at it, the brain refused to perceive perspective. Angles seemed both acute and obtuse. Lines straight and curved, a hum emanated from it. It wasn't a mechanical sound, it was the sound of its own transformation. We stood in silence, stunned. Even Donovan's soldiers, men who had been through war, looked at it with open mouths. Peterson fell to his knees. He didn't shout, he just looked at the structure and muttered something about phase transitions and multidimensional projections. He said it was physically impossible, that this thing couldn't exist. Donovan seemed to be the only one who maintained composure. November 16, 1946, to touch it. It felt like sacrilege, like violating a law of nature that hadn't even been written yet. Donovan impatiently nudged Langley. The biologist swallowed, adjusted his glasses, and slowly walked forward. He carried a sample kit. The closer he got to the central column, the louder the hum became. He stopped a couple of steps from the nearest polyhedron. Its surface was truly black, and dark nebulae slowly drifted within it. Langley raised his scraper but froze. He looked at Donovan, then at us. Then, making a decision, he put away the tool and took off his thick glove. With his bare hand, he reached for the surface. The moment his fingers touched the black ice, the hum abruptly stopped. A deafening silence fell. Langley froze. His eyes widened, but he didn't scream. He just stared into nothingness. His mouth was slightly open. 10 seconds passed, maybe 15. Then he jerked his hand back as if burned. "It's warm," Langley whispered, his voice trembling. "It's alive." He took a few steps back, stumbling. "What did you see?" Donovan asked harshly. Langley shook his head. "I didn't see, I knew. It showed me its structure, not its own any structure. A cell, a crystal, a nervous system, everything, information. It's an archive, a library of forms." He spoke disjointedly, stumbling, trying to put into words what had no words. The hum slowly returned, but now it seemed different. It had new overtones, more complex. Yes, but it was clearly unsatisfied. It needed facts, samples, not metaphysical revelations. He ordered the engineers to deploy a portable drilling rig. They brought a small machine on skids, set it up, and pressed a diamond-tipped drill against the surface of the nearest crystal. When the engineer started the engine, the screech of metal echoed through the hall, but it couldn't drown out the low hum of the structure. The drill rotated, pressed against the black surface, but nothing happened. Absolutely nothing. No dust, no scratches, not even the slightest indentation. After a minute, the drill bit glowed red, then simply melted, dripping useless metal. The engineer turned off the engine. There was no trace left on the polyhedron's surface. Now it was my turn. As a glaciologist, I had to give my assessment. I approached the structure. There was almost no fear. It was replaced by all-consuming curiosity. I also took off my glove. The air near the surface vibrated. I placed my palm on the smooth, warm facet. Unlike Langley, I didn't receive a flood of information about biological forms. My consciousness was flooded with something else. Time, the unimaginable geological antiquity of this place. I felt how this continent formed, how tectonic plates converged and diverged. Ice ages passed in my mind like breaths. I felt the weight of millions of tons of ice above me, pressure that lasted for epochs, and I realized this wasn't ice. It was something that had taken the form of ice, used it as a matrix, as building material, but was infinitely more complex and ancient. This structure had been here before the first life appeared on the planet. It was waiting. I withdrew my hand, my head spinning. At that moment, the structure reacted. The hum intensified severalfold, becoming almost painful. Geometric figures began to move faster, rearranging themselves at a noticeable speed. And then the floor beneath our feet began to glow. From the base of the central column, thin lines of light ran in all directions, forming a complex, constantly changing pattern. They diverged, intersected, forming something resembling both a star map and a circuit board the size of a city block. Peterson, who had been sitting on the floor with his head in his hands all this time, suddenly looked up. His eyes were filled with terror and recognition. "It's a map," he breathed, "but not of space. It's a probability schematic, causal relationship roots." The glowing lines on the floor continued to spread, approaching us. One of Donovan's soldiers, a young man standing closest to the edge of the pattern, instinctively stepped back, but it was too late. One of the lines touched the toe of his boot. He didn't scream, he didn't fall, he just froze, stuck in a half step. His face was devoid of any expression, he wasn't breathing. Langley, overcoming his fear, ran up to him, grabbed his wrists, trying to feel for a pulse. "Nothing," he whispered. His face turned pale, complete cessation of all functions. "He's not dead," he switched off. Panic began to grip even Donovan's hardened soldiers. They raised their weapons, but who was there to shoot? The glowing pattern on the floor, the geometry. Donovan shouted an order to retreat to the exit, but the patterns were already blocking our path, slowly but inexorably spreading throughout the hall. And then the hum changed again. It broke down into a series of distinct pure tones that followed each other in a specific sequence. It was a melody, but not human, mathematically precise and utterly alien. Peterson jumped to his feet. He looked at the spreading floor schematics, listened to these sounds, and his face reflected something more terrifying than panic, understanding. He looked at us with wild eyes and shouted, drowning out the hum and the strange music. He wasn't shouting from fear, he was shouting from a terrifying realization. "It's not studying us," he roared. "It's not defending itself, it's calibrating us." And at that moment, the light on the floor went out, the melody stopped, the hum ceased. Complete, utterly unnatural silence fell, and it was many times worse than any sound. We stood in the darkness, illuminated only by our flashlight beams, in complete silence at the center of something incomprehensible that had just finished its tuning. November 18, 1946. The silence lasted a minute, maybe two. In this absolute soundlessness, time lost meaning. Every beat of my own heart in my ears seemed deafening, but outside there was nothing. We stood frozen, our flashlight beams darting around the hall, catching from the darkness the motionless body of the soldier, Peterson's crazed face, the impenetrable black surface of the central structure. It was silent, it no longer moved, it simply was. Donovan was the first to recover. He brought the radio to his face and pressed the transmit button. Answer, over, no response, no static hiss. Channel was dead, as if all its internals had been ripped out. He tried again, the result was the same. The silence sounded particularly eerie. Don't you understand? It was measuring us, our vital signs, the structure of our tissues, the electrical activity of our brains, even the quantum fluctuations in our nerve cells. It was looking for a resonant frequency. It was finding the key to what makes us us, and it found it. At that moment, a sound came from the far, unlit part of the hall. The shuffling sound of boots on the smooth floor, one step then another. The sound was perfectly clear, distinct, just as our own steps should have sounded if the acoustics of this place weren't dead. All flashlights darted in that direction. Beams of light cut through the darkness but found nothing but the black expanse of the floor and walls receding into infinity. And then a voice came from there, Langley's voice. "The density is incredible. Steel can't penetrate it." It was the exact phrase Langley uttered an hour ago when he tried to scrape the wall. But Langley was standing next to me, his mouth tightly shut, his face a mask of horror. "It's not me," he whispered. The nightmare began, and from the darkness other voices rained down, our voices, fragments of conversations, snippets of phrases we had uttered since landing, an engineer cursing the melted drill, my own voice describing the feeling of antiquity. The sounds overlapped, creating a mad cacophony of our own words, devoid of meaning and context. It was acoustic torture. "It's not just repeating," Peterson shouted again, trying to drown out the chorus of our phantoms. "It's reproducing, creates imprints not just of sound but of everything else." The soldiers began to fire wildly into the darkness. Bullets flew into the void. The sound of the shots was as muffled and viscous as the sound of that first explosion outside. Brought no relief, Donovan shouted, "Cease fire." The echo of his command immediately returned from the darkness, mocking him. His authority evaporated. We were trapped with something that was playing with us, using us as material. One of the soldiers, a corporal named Evans, suddenly cried out and clutched his ears. "Shut up, get out of my head." In response, a phantom voice, sounding exactly like his own, replied from the darkness calmly and clearly, "Mom asked you not to go. She said it would end badly." Evans burst into tears. It was his fear, his personal memories brought out for everyone to see. He raised his rifle and opened indiscriminate fire into the darkness, and the darkness answered. From the black floor in the spot where the flashlight beams were directed, a figure began to rise. It formed, it stepped forward. He raised his rifle and the copy did the same. "What is that?" someone whispered next to me. The copy approached closely. Evans screamed. A short, broken cry. The double didn't hit him. It simply stepped forward and merged with him. For one terrible moment, their silhouettes overlapped, flickering and distorting like an image on a broken television. Then Corporal Evans's figure went limp and collapsed onto the floor. The moment froze, its face became completely blank, and then it simply collapsed, spreading across the floor and becoming part of the black surface again. It all happened in seconds. We froze in horror. Now we understood it didn't just kill, it erased, replaced the original with emptiness. We understood it doesn't create copies, it creates emptiness in human form and then fills it with us. Donovan, whose face in the flashlight beam was gray, gave the last order that made sense. To the exit, run. We turned and ran towards the tunnel we had come from. And behind us, in the light of our receding flashlights, new figures began to rise from the floor, the figures of each of us. November 20, 1946. The entry is fragmented. I'm writing this on the run. We're running through an endless black corridor. It seems longer than when we came here. Maybe it is longer. Maybe this place stretches and compresses at its will. Our heavy breaths, the clatter of boots, the clang of equipment, the only sounds in this dead world. Behind us, silence. They are not running. They are just walking, with a steady, measured, relentless pace. We look back, and in the flickering flashlight silhouettes we see them. Our exact copies, dark silhouettes against the darkness, silent and purposeful. Their silent pursuit is more frightening than any scream. This is not just a chase, it's psychological warfare. They started talking, not in chorus like in the hall, but one by one. My double's voice, calm and reason, came from the silence behind. "Arthur, think, coarse samples from such ice. We could read the planet's history for 1 billion years. It's the greatest discovery in history. It hit my most vulnerable spot, my scientific curiosity. I stumbled, but someone, Donovan, I think, grabbed my hand and pulled me forward. Then Peterson's double spoke. He wasn't shouting like the real Peterson before, but spoke quietly, insinuatingly. "Calibration complete. The vessel is ready for consciousness transfer. No more limitations of flesh, Peterson. Only pure knowledge. Isn't that what you've always wanted?" We ran, and they engaged us in this monstrous dialogue. Donovan's double gave orders in his original's voice, trying to make the soldiers stop. "Take defensive positions. I order you to engage." The two soldiers remaining with us hesitated. Their true identity, their essence forged by discipline, fought with the instinct for self-preservation. One of the engineers, a communications specialist running slightly ahead, slipped and fell. We ran past. Donovan growled, "Don't stop." And no one dared to disobey. I glanced over my shoulder. I saw the engineer's copy, without changing pace, approach the fallen man. It didn't offer a hand. It simply bent down and covered him with its body like a shroud. A brief flash of distortion, and only one man lay on the floor. He no longer moved. Another flashlight beam went out. The worst was with Peterson. He ran beside me, his face a mask of terror. His double continued to tempt him, promising answers to all the questions that had plagued him his whole life. "It will be yours," and the physicist broke. He stopped abruptly, turning to face his pursuers. There was no longer fear on his face. There was a mad, hungry greed for knowledge. "Yes," he whispered. "Yes, I want to see." He took a step towards his double. The rest of us kept running. No one tried to stop him. We all understood he was already lost. I didn't see the merger itself, but I heard his mad, happy laughter abruptly cut off. We were approaching the exit. The corridor walls stopped being static. They rippled like the surface of water. The black ice bent, the geometry of space changed before our eyes. The passage narrowed, then widened again. New protrusions grew from the walls, forcing us to weave. This place didn't want to let us go. It played with us, turning our path to salvation into a labyrinth. Only a little left. Me, Donovan, biologist, Langley, and two soldiers. Ahead a light glimmered, not a flashlight beam, but another. A dim gray, real one. The light of the Antarctic day breaking through the breach we made an eternity GG6 ago. Hope struck my head, giving me strength. We ran, not feeling our frostbitten legs or burning lungs. 50 meters, 40, 30. We saw the exit. Gray, saving light, about 20 meters left, shouting something incoherent. And then right in front of us, a solid wall of black ice rose from the floor and walls of the passage, cutting us off from the world. It formed in a second, smooth, monolithic, without a single seam. The exit disappeared. We crashed into it, pounded with our fists, but it was like hitting a rock. And then I turned around. Our pursuers had stopped walking. They stood a few steps away from us. 5 figures, exact copies of the 5 of us. They didn't attack. They just stood in the dead silence of the corridor and waited, date illegible. Presumably November 21, 1946. We were trapped, 5 living people and 5 silent reflections. The silence pressed down, becoming physically palpable. My thoughts raced. This is the end, but what kind? What were they going to do? The answer didn't come through action. The answer came through a quiet, eerie stillness. They began to move, not towards us. They just lived. One of the soldiers' doubles raised his hand and ran it across his face, just like an old man wiping away a tear. Langley's copy suddenly clutched his chest. His face contorted in a silent grimace of grief, mimicking a heart attack he might have had in 30 years. Donovan's double just stood, straightened up, and stared into the void, a monument to a long, empty retirement he would never have. The soldier disappeared, his scream cut off mid-word, his double dissolved. The second soldier, seeing this, did the same. Perhaps it was rebellion, perhaps despair. He also disappeared. 3 remained, me, Donovan, and Langley, and 3 of our copies who stopped their performance and silently watched us again. The air became thick. Donovan slowly lowered his gaze to his belt. Throughout this panicked chase, he hadn't used the last resort, a grenade. It won't damage this structure, it won't break the wall, but it was his last order, the last decision he could make himself. He looked at me, then at Langley. In his empty eyes, I saw something other than duty for the first time, perhaps resignation. It's not for them to decide how we end, he said quietly. His voice was neither heroic nor desperate, just a statement of fact. He didn't throw the grenade. He pulled the pin and pressed it to his chest. Langley stood beside him. He understood everything and didn't step back. He simply closed his eyes. I stood a few meters away from them and instinctively covered my face with my hands. The explosion was a pathetic pop that was immediately swallowed by the silence of the place. A brief flash blinded me and the shockwave threw me against the wall. I hit my head and lost consciousness for a few seconds. When my vision returned, it was all over. The acrid smell of cordite hung in the air. There was almost nothing left of Donovan and Langley. Their copies had also disappeared. Perhaps because the originals ceased to exist according to their rules. Perhaps their mission was accomplished. I was alone, alive and wounded. I tried to stand up, but a sharp pain in my leg and dizziness prevented me. And then I saw it, my copy. It was the only one left. It stood a few steps away and looked at me with its empty eyes. It didn't approach. It didn't try to merge with me. It just watched. Then it did something I couldn't have predicted. It turned away from me and walked to the wall that blocked our exit. It touched it with its palm. The black surface rippled. From the wall, slowly as if being squeezed from within, a small object appeared. Rectangular, dark, my notebook, the very one in which I kept these records. It must have fallen out of my pocket during the explosion. The copy took it, opened it to the last page, then it sat down on the floor next to me. It looked at me, and then at the blank lines and began to write. The last entry in the diary is made by the same hand as all the previous ones. The ink is fresh. The explosion stunned me, yes. Donovan and Langley are dead. Their copies disappeared. Mine remained. It stands over me and doesn't touch me. The wall that blocked the exit is still in place. I am wounded. I will not get out, but I must finish the entry. I must tell the world what happened here. What happened here.